We are on Culp's Hill, which became a critical part of the Union defensive line here during the Battle of Gettysburg. And in fact, it's the only hill that saw some fighting in some form or fashion over all 3 days of the Battle of Gettysburg here. Now, we know now that this hill essentially became a fortress with the breastworks that the Union troops constructed here. But imagine being a soldier and being told to move your regiment beyond the breastworks and fight the enemy. Well, that's exactly what the 66th Ohio did here at Culp's Hill. We're going to follow in their footsteps and we're going to learn about their story here today. So let's orient ourselves. We are at Culp's Hill, and here is the famed Culp's Hill Observation Tower. And panning to my left, you have the eastern slope of Culp's Hill. Now, the 66th Ohio was in Colonel Charles Candy's brigade, and they arrived in this area around 6 a.m. on July 2nd of 1863. Now, around 6 p.m., Candy's brigade was ordered south to reinforce the Union line on other portions of the battlefield here. You had fighting in the famed Peach Orchard, the Wheat Field, Devil's Den. Well, the Union line was beginning to falter there, so reinforcements were pulled from this location, and all that was left here on July 2nd of 1863 were 1,300 New Yorkers under the command of George Sears Green. Now, the 66th would return to this area around 1:30 a.m. on now July 3rd, and they would be given a special assignment. The 66th Ohio was told that they would be advancing beyond the breastworks here to deliver flanking fire on the attacking Confederates. Now, another regimental officer would state that I am expecting an attack at any moment. If you go out there, the enemy will simply swallow you. So imagine being told that you're advancing beyond the breastworks here that would have run all along this area here, okay? So now we're being told at daybreak we're advancing beyond these breastworks, which are offering ample protection, and we're going to deliver flanking fire. Well, that's what the 66th Ohio was doing. So daybreak on July 3rd of 1863, the regiment would awaken, form line of battle, and begin advancing beyond the breastworks here. So we've moved a little closer to the Union line here on Culp's Hill, and we are right next to Battery E of the Pennsylvania Artillery. I believe it's the independent battery, but they were stationed here, and you can see their right flank. Just to the right of the right flank marker of the Battery E artillery is a trail leading down to the 66th Ohio. So in the early morning hours of July 3rd, the 66th Ohio would form lines of battle. Their advance would be covered by an artillery bombardment, which unfortunately did nothing for them but alert the Confederate forces. So they would step over these breastworks here and begin taking up position just before you here. Now, like we mentioned, it alerted the Confederate forces here, so they began receiving fire as soon as they stepped over the defenses here. And First Lieutenant John T. Morgan of Company I and Second Lieutenant Charles E. Butts of Company E were both struck twice as they were advancing over the breastworks here. Now, both men were wounded and they survived their wounds. However, imagine being a soldier in the 66 and you're leaving the comfort of Culp's Hill, and now you just had 2 officers hit by enemy fire. So the 66 would position themselves here. This is their right flank right here, and panning this way you have the obviously 66th Ohio Monument, and the left flank marker is down this way, and they would have been facing this direction here to our right, and they would have began delivering volleys into the attacking Confederates in this direction. But like we mentioned, that artillery bombardment kind of alerted some Confederate forces here, and they began receiving skirmish fire from this direction, from the 25th Virginia. They had skirmishers at the base of the hill near a stone wall, and they began delivering volleys into the backs of the 66th Ohio here. Now, the commander ordered his men of the 66th to take cover behind trees, rocks, pretty much anything they can find. So imagine a couple hundred men in this area taking cover behind whatever they could, and they began delivering volleys in this direction, and they drove off the Virginia skirmishers. Now, they took up this position here, I want to say around 5 a.m., maybe 5:30 a.m., and they held this position until noon on July 3rd of 1863. So they were here for quite a bit, and they were part of the longest sustained fighting here at Gettysburg, which took place at Culp's Hill. So we are looking at their right flank marker. Okay, so their line would have essentially run in this direction here, firing here. And we're making our way down to the monument here. Now, something I'm also noticing is it is November of 2023, and when it gets colder here on battlefields, you can see a lot more of the terrain because all this undergrowth has essentially died off or gone dormant. So you can really see just how far down this slopes, and you can kind of help paint the picture of how tough this position actually was to take, especially this portion of the battlefield. I believe on July 2nd, this was an area where the 60th New York suffered relatively light casualties. I believe that is their monument there, and Confederate forces were assaulting essentially straight up. I want to give you a peek at that as we're here on sunrise, as you can see that in the distance there. But look at this. Imagine being a soldier here. You're on the military crest, you're firing straight down into advancing Confederate forces. I mean, there's no cover for them, and you have all the cover in the world. Really strong position here at Culp's Hill.
At one time, we were within a few feet of their works, but the fire was so heavy we cannot stand it. Lieutenant Colonel L. Salyer, 50th Virginia Infantry. I ordered my regiment to take up a sheltered position behind trees and stones and direct their fire on the sharpshooters, whom we soon dislodged. Lieutenant Colonel Eugene Powell, 66 Ohio Infantry.
So we're making our way a little further down the hill here, and we're coming up to another marker that I want to share with you. Just watching my footing here, and we are approaching the spot where Major Joshua Palmer of Company B would have been hit in the chest. He was hit in his left lung while he was urging his men to fire on the advancing Confederates. Now, again, here's another look at the direction that the 66 Ohio would have been facing. And I'm panning back to my left so you can see the marker here. But it is said that Major Palmer was in this general area, urging his men to fire, encouraging them when a Confederate minie-ball would strike him in the left lung. He would fall mortally wounded. Now, he would be brought back up to Culp's Hill by a handful of privates, and one private would place a handkerchief on his chest to attempt to stop the bleeding. Palmer would then utter, "Oh, that did me so much good," then said encouragingly to the privates that were up there, "Stay with them, boys. I will be back with you soon." Unfortunately for Palmer, he would succumb to his injuries about a week later. But this is the general area where Major Palmer was mortally wounded, and I believe he was the highest ranking officer of Ohio that was killed in action here at Gettysburg. Now, if you're curious as to where this marker is, here's the Palmer marker. I'm going to pan back up towards Culp's Hill. And in the distance, you can see the 66 Ohio monument. And just to the right of the monument, you have the Culp's Hill observation tower. And again, we are on the east side of Culp's Hill here. So I just want to show you the terrain here again. We are looking straight down at Culp's Hill here. And it's just a testament of how the terrain can be used to your advantage. And looking back up towards Culp's Hill. So the 66 Ohio, you see their monument here. Now their line would have ran in this direction here, and right here is their left flank marker. So you can see the distance that this regiment covered here. Panning back up, and again the right flank marker is just beyond their monument, which is here. And they were delivering accurate and deadly volleys to Confederate forces advancing up the hill on the camera here from left to right. But just look at the terrain here that they would have had to assault up. There's no cover here. And you are exposed and you're advancing right into the formidable defenses built here by the Union troops. I am beyond grateful that I was able to come out here and share the 66 Ohio story and of course Major Palmer's story with all of you. And hopefully a few more people are now aware of this man's sacrifice. He was an ordinary man who was a dentist before the war, and now he was on the slopes of Culp's Hill where he would be mortally wounded here. And this is the definition of keeping history alive, resurrecting this man's story so more people can learn about it, and hopefully more people can come out here and visit his marker and share his story. That's all for this episode. Let's see what else Gettysburg has in store for us here today.